I'm going to read that gospel story for us one more time because it's not too long and it's important, but we might misunderstand it. So here it is again. At that very time, there were some present who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. Jesus asked them, "Do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, they were worse sinners than all the other Galileans? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all perish as they did. Or those 18 who were killed when the Tower of Siloam fell on them, do you think that they were worse offenders than all the others living in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all perish just as they did." Then he told them this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the gardener, "See here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and still I find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" The gardener replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year, until I dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good, but if not, you can cut it down." Now here's what this passage from Luke is all about. Cut to the chase. Here's what Jesus is saying. These 2 things. Number 1, all sinners deserve punishment. And number 2, God is patient with sinners. All sinners deserve punishment. God is patient with sinners. That's the takeaway. The lesson from this story about Jesus and tragedy and a tree. First of all, the story is a story about Jesus. We know what Jesus is like. He's holy, determined, compassionate, and faithful. If we read the story of Luke's Gospel from the beginning to this moment in chapter 13, we'd see Jesus doing many things, calling disciples, teaching the people, healing those with various infirmities, eating with various kinds of outcasts, astounding some with wisdom and authority, but angering others because of it. Here in these verses, some people come to Jesus wanting a little dose of that wisdom and authority. There's been a tragedy, and they want Jesus to interpret it for them. So this story is also about that tragedy. There was a group of Galileans, that is, people from Galilee, that area where Jesus often traveled and taught. And this group of Galileans had been brutally put to death by Pilate. That's Pontius Pilate, the same one we know from other parts of the Jesus story, was the Roman ruler over that territory. The people, well, they want Jesus to interpret this tragedy, this death, this spilling of blood, to say something about it. What should they think? Why did this happen? So Jesus does. And this is what he says. Do you think that these Galileans suffered in this way because they were worse sinners than everybody else? Do you think it was their fault that they died in this tragic way? No, says Jesus. No, it wasn't their fault. But I tell you, unless you repent, you will perish just like they did. The crowds came to Jesus so that he could tell them about this tragedy, this death. They must have wanted Jesus to summon up his wisdom and authority to say what this tragedy, this death meant. And Jesus says, it meant nothing. He doesn't philosophize. He doesn't rationalize. He doesn't tell us the reason for suffering or the meaning of life. He just says, tragedy and death happen. And if you don't repent, if you remain in sin, it will happen to you. And Jesus says it again. He tells about people who were building a tower, and the tower came tumbling down and 18 died. Was it their fault? Their sin? God's judgment against them for some wrongdoing? No, Jesus says. But unless you repent, you will meet the same fate that they did. At the heart of these stern and stark words from Jesus is this clear message that all sinners deserve punishment. Not that the worst sinners get the worst punishments or that suffering is God's way of punishing us, but simply this: all sinners deserve punishment. And as hard as it is for us to hear that, deep down inside, we know it's true. And so if the story stopped there, if that was it, we left to feel pretty beaten down by these words, wouldn't we? But thankfully the passage goes on. It goes on to tell about this tree. And this story is also about this tree. It's a little parable. Parable Jesus tells, but it completes the whole picture for us. It gives us something else to know and to hold on to about God besides just this word of sin and punishment. And it goes like this. There was a man who had a vineyard with fig trees. And one of his fig trees, year after year, produced no fruit. So the man ordered his gardener to cut it down and clear it out. But the gardener pleaded with the man, convinced him to give it one more year of gracious care and nurturing, one more chance for fruit. Did the man relent? Did the gardener convince him to give the tree one more year? Did he give the gardener permission to do everything he could to turn the tree around, to get it living and yielding fruit as it should? Well, the parable doesn't say. It just ends with those questions lingering. But we know what the parable is doing. We know what it's pointing to, where it's leading us. It's asking us to consider our own lives. Are they fruitful or fruitless? Are we healthy and vibrant in our lives as children of God? Or does God find us lacking and worthy of being cut down and cleared out? But the parable is also showing us something about the character of God. Even though God has got lots of fruitless trees, that is, lots of faithless children, God is patient with sinners. God is patient with sinners. God gives us something very valuable: time. Time to be cared for. Time to be nurtured. Another year. A year of grace. That's what that time in the parable is, after all. Isn't it a year of grace? The tree had already proven itself fruitless. Why wait to cut it down? Well, because the Master is gracious and patient, just like God is with us. See, Jesus interprets these stories of tragedy by pointing to the tragedy of sin. But he also tells this parable which points to the grace of God. Because both of these things are true, you see. All sinners deserve punishment. And God is patient with sinners. Let's face it, we deserve punishment. Our sin, all the ways we have turned from God, all the broken promises, and lying and forgetting and pretending that we would like to act isn't really a big deal. About that, Jesus says, repent or perish. And perishing punishment is what we deserve. But we receive patience. We receive grace. Grace is where we stand. Grace is how we live. Grace, which is not an excuse for continuing in the way of sin, but time. Time for Jesus, the great gardener, to work on us and work in us so we can be fruitful and faithful. God is patient with us, and this patience has a name: Jesus. It's a story about Jesus, about tragedy, and about a tree. Not just these verses we hear today, but the whole story, the whole gospel. God sent Jesus into the world to be holy, determined, compassionate, and faithful. And Jesus got caught up in the tragedy of human life, among the infirm, the outcast, the hopeless, the dying, the sinners, caught up in it so much that he took upon himself the tragedy of death. But that death, on the cross, on the tree, which Jesus hung upon, now it stands as sign and instrument of God's patient, redeeming love for us. Jesus took the cutting down and the clearing out upon himself to give us another year, another chance, chance after chance after chance to be who God has created us to be, well and good. How will we use that year? How will we use this season? How will we use this time?